In the spring of 2026, the long-standing tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran transitioned into a high-intensity, sustained military exchange. This escalation prompted a rare internal shift at the Associated Press. In March 2026, the news agency issued a new editorial directive, authorizing its global network of journalists to officially use the word war to describe the conflict. The AP's criteria for this label relies on the scope and duration of the fighting. This dashboard shows the threshold: 40 days of continuous combat involving over 650 ballistic missiles, a volume of fire that moved the situation beyond a mere series of skirmishes. For decades, these nations had already been killing each other's personnel and targeting high-ranking officials. Even the 2020 drone assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, which brought the region to a standstill, didn't trigger this linguistic change in the international press. Editors generally avoid the word war to prevent inflating the significance of isolated strikes. Crossing this line serves as a formal acknowledgement that the mechanisms previously used to contain the violence had been exhausted. The path to this acknowledgement began with the first Trump administration's decision to withdraw the United States from the 2015 nuclear deal. This withdrawal was the centerpiece of the Maximum Pressure Campaign, a strategy designed to use America's dominance of the global financial system to force Iran back to the negotiating table. Between 2018 and 2020, the economic offensive grew to include over 1,500 individual sanctions, creating a total trade wall around the Iranian state. These precise measures cut off the central bank, shipping infrastructure, and the national oil company funding the regime's daily operations. As inflation climbed, pressure shifted to the Iranian people. Highways became sites of protest and security crackdowns as the cost of living became unsustainable. While the campaign successfully drained Iran's formal treasury, it left the regime with few options, other than the use of asymmetrical military force to signal that it could still impose costs on its neighbors and the West. By funding proxy groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, Tehran created a buffer to engage in conflict without its own army. These groups operate in the gray zone, damaging an adversary's interests while maintaining enough distance to deny direct involvement. In late 2019, the cycle tightened. A militia killed a U.S. contractor, triggering airstrikes and a retaliatory mob attack on the American embassy in Baghdad. The U.S. responded by killing General Soleimani. For a moment, the distance between the two governments vanished, replaced by a direct, unmasked confrontation between sovereign states. Iran launched a direct ballistic missile strike on U.S. bases in Iraq. It was the first time since the 1980s that the two nations had engaged in such a transparent state-on-state military exchange. Even so, both sides chose to retreat back into the gray zone. They returned to cyber attacks and sanctions, rather than sustained ground or air campaigns, allowing the press to maintain the label of escalating tensions rather than war. By the spring of 2026, the strategy of managed escalation had run its course. Years of economic isolation had depleted the Iranian regime's patience for shadowboxing. The 2026 strikes targeted the very top of the Iranian hierarchy, including the supreme leader. When operations reach this level of the state apparatus, the pretense of a proxy conflict becomes impossible to sustain. Iran responded by attempting to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. This map shows why that mattered. 20% of the world's daily oil supply passes through this single, narrow corridor. With direct strikes on sovereign territory and the weaponization of global energy choke points, the gray zone vanished. The violence reached a scale where tensions no longer accurately described the physical reality of the destruction. The shift in a newsroom's vocabulary is the lagging indicator of a strategy that has moved from containment to total collision. It is the moment when the world finally catches up to the accumulation of force and is forced to call the situation by its true name.